Thank you, everyone. And my name is Julian.
So I've heard.
Thank you. I am the co-founder and CEO of Inkomoko. So Inkomoko, we offer sort of business incubation and advisory services, primarily in and around refugee communities in East Africa. We have worked with a little over 60,000 micro and small businesses. So people like Samantha has been in our program, and now she's a staff because her side hustle is in Inkomoko. But we also have Faiza here, and so we have so many more incredible entrepreneurs. We do both advisory services, and then we also have an in-house investment fund. So right now we are the largest lender to refugee businesses on the continent.
That's fantastic.
And so that's why we have Natasha here and David. They're the ones who are just making incredible investment decisions. About 25% of our total portfolio is actually Sharia compliant products for our Muslim clients. And so that's why they're not loan officers, they're investment officers. But we don't do any equity or anything like that.
What's the size of the portfolio?
We start as low as $50 US and grow up to 50,000. We lend at below market rates and we don't require collateral. So Karen, just remember that, no collateral required. And someone like Faiza, for instance, when we started with her, we had sort of a smaller loan and then we grew. And she's in sort of the multiple tens of thousands. In Inkomoko, we have just now about 350 staff. We'll probably be over 400 at the end of the year. We are growing very quickly, but it's something that is just so dear to all of our hearts that it's not work. It's much more fun. It's fun and work. And so it's just been such an honor to have you here because I have like 5 different things that I want to learn from you. But okay. I would happily introduce you, but I also don't want to tell your story. And I would love for you, if you would, to tell us who you are.
So my name is Stacey Abrams, and I'm going to sort of wrap it around what I do today. So I am an author. I've published 15 books, so 8 romance novels, 2 legal thrillers, 2 children's books, a leadership book, or 2 leadership books, and a non-fiction work on the importance of democracy and ending voter suppression. I am an entrepreneur. Was very reluctantly one. I was a tax attorney by training. I attended law school intending to go. I knew I was not going to be long for being a corporate attorney, but I thought it would last longer. However,
how long did it last?
3 years.
Okay.
So I was a tax attorney for nonprofit organizations. So I began my work actually when I was at Yale Law School. I was the volunteer lawyer for a number of organizations that could never afford lawyers who'd been trained at Yale. And so I was home. My parents are from Mississippi. Do you know where Mississippi is? So do you know where Georgia is? Okay. Mississippi is like Georgia's poorer cousin. The state of Mississippi is the poorest state in the United States. And it has a very long history of racism and segregation and underinvestment. And that's where I grew up. And so going to college was something my parents adamantly believed in because both of them were the first people in their families to go. And then for me going to law school, I was the first person in our family to ever get a degree like that. But when I was in law school, I actually moved home for a semester. I was studying and writing a paper about religious organizations that were involved in civic engagement. And so I was living in my mother's parsonage. Both of my parents were Methodist ministers. And they had to explain to their neighbors why their daughter, who they kept saying was in law school, was living at home. And so they would explain that I helped organizations. And so I ended up getting clients because people would come and say, well, can you help me with this paperwork that I have to file? Or I'm applying for this grant, can you assist me? And the answer was no, I didn't know what I was doing. But I taught myself how to do this work. And the first client I had paid me with a goat. I did not live in a rural part of Mississippi. And so I tried to give the goat back. And my mother and father pulled me aside and said, this is a person who has pride in their work and they want to compensate you for your work. And the most important thing you can do is respect their intention. And I did that. I then gave the goat away to someone else because I did not know what to do with a goat in New Haven. But what it started for me was my first small business. It was a nonprofit organization that would help disadvantaged organizations throughout the southern region of the United States. I went from law school I was a tax attorney. And as a tax attorney, I served big corporations and universities and hospitals, any organization, NGOs, I did a lot of NGO work, but I also did a lot of pro bono work. So I took on clients who could never afford to hire my firm. So many clients that my firm asked me to stop because I was not covering the cost of my salary. And most of my clients couldn't pay their bills. And so we had a very nice conversation, and we all decided I wasn't going to be a lawyer there much longer. But they actually helped me transition. I then became deputy city attorney for the city of Atlanta. And so my job there was infrastructure, it was community development, economic development work. So I learned a lot about small businesses, about entrepreneurship, and how to help build the actual capacity of communities, both the physical plant as well as the actual managerial capacity. And then from there, I left that to run for office, and that's when I became an entrepreneur. So I couldn't be a lawyer for the city when I was in the state legislature. And so I started my first small business for money, and I was consultant for a major project. I then found a business partner because I was a terrible business person on my own. I was happy to do the work, but I didn't want to ask anyone to hire me, which is why I talk about the issues of I didn't solve it. I just hired someone to do it for me. So my business partner was very outgoing, and so she would find the business and I would so we both did the work, but we split our responsibilities. I then started a beverage company for babies and toddlers, and we grew, but we grew too fast, and we couldn't find financing. So there was we had I don't know the equivalent of Whole Foods. We had a massive grocery store that wanted to buy thousands of our products, but we had to automate our equipment. And to automate the equipment would have cost $75,000. The invoice that they gave us, how much they were going to pay us, was twice that amount. But we couldn't get anyone to loan 2 women the $75,000. And so we had to shut down our business because we could only do the bare minimum. And so from there, we started a new company where we bought invoices from small businesses. So we realized we couldn't solve our own problem, but we raised money and solved the problem for others. And so that was called Now Account. I did that until 2017 when I decided to stop making any money and I ran for office. I ran for governor of Georgia. I was the first Black woman in American history to ever be the nominee for governor. I almost made it, didn't quite get there. But in the process, I was able to leverage other work that I'd done, and this is the last part of it. So when I was in the legislature, I served in the House of Representatives, so in the state parliament for 11 years. For 7 years, I was the leader of the minority party. And in that role, I started an organization called the New Georgia Project, where we registered almost 1 million voters of color, Black and Latino and AAPI and Indigenous voters. I started a group called Blue Institute to train young people of color. We have a fast-growing community of color, but most of the political power was held by white men. And so even if you wanted to elect someone who was representative, there was no one who could help run their campaign. So everyone was recruiting candidates, but no one was training anyone to be the communications person or the finance person or the manager. And if you are only a figurehead, if everything else comes from the majority community, you never get an authentic voice. And so I trained young people to do that work. I lost my election. And in response, I created 3 organizations, one called Fair Fight that protects democracy in Georgia and across the country. Fair Count, which makes certain that communities of color and disadvantaged communities are included in our US Census. And then a group called SEEP, which focuses on public policy. And so for me, the whole story is how do you take the ambitions that you have, couple it with organizations that can do the work, train people to do that work. And so I don't run any of my organizations anymore. My belief, I love the CEO shadow track. I start an organization, I run it myself, and I train someone else to be my partner so that when I leave, they can keep doing the work. And so I've been able to do that for 7 different organizations, 3 companies, and now I'm working on environmental issues, writing some more books, and doing my best to help NDI spread democracy around the world. And that's my story.
Wow.
I mean, I'm no Sam, but I'm trying.
No. I mean, thank you so much for that, Stacey. I mean, I'm looking at you, Emmanuel, and I'm imagining like part of her story also resonated with you, right? Like you have a contract for $100,000, you just need a machine for $10,000. Like it's hard, right?
Yeah. So how did you solve?
Sometimes you have to, if I can say, to give up and then look for other partners who can just release.
No. Yeah, I mean, so one question that I have, and maybe I could start a couple of questions here as you guys are thinking about the questions that you have. So, you know, it sounds like your political life is Georgia, and it started there, and that there were opportunities for you to think about sort of farther afield opportunities and, you know, national races, but wanting to go back and doing, you know, running for governor the second time in Georgia. You know, as somebody who seems to have very deep connections to your community, how do you balance that staying at home while also seeing opportunities for greater good even farther away?
So I think of myself, I grew up in Mississippi. I came of age in Georgia. I am a daughter of the South. And in the United States, being Southern, especially being Black and Southern, really is a conversation about how do you help everyone who has incredible capacity, but very few people believe in us. They won't invest. We are the least likely to get education. We're the least likely to get jobs. If we get jobs, we're the most likely to be underfunded. And so Georgia, I think of Georgia as my base of operations, but my service population is the South. And if you solve problems in the South, you find solutions for problems for everyone. And so I ground myself in that. What drives me, my fundamental belief is that poverty is immoral, it is economically inefficient, and it is solvable. And if that's your ethos, all of the work that I do and all of the ways I do my work, I'm constantly thinking about how does what I do here have broader impact. And so every group I create, every organization I start, my message to myself is it has to be replicable, meaning someone else should be able to do it too. If it's so unique that only I can do it, then it's a dumb idea. Because if only one person can solve a problem, then what you design is a system that's intended to fail. Because all you have to do is get rid of that one person. I always want everything I do to be replicated. And I know when you're in business, your mission is to be so singular that no one can do what you do. But that doesn't mean that no one can do it better than you do, is how I think about it. And so on the work that I do, my mission on the nonprofit side, on the NGO side, is to be replicable and then to be exportable, meaning that not only does it work where I am and other people can do it, but that other people in other places can understand it and try it too. And so I've actually advised organizations across the country and actually around the world on some of the democracy work that we do. But on the economic side, I've also had conversations about what does that look like. And I think the sort of, to tie it all together, I think it's always important to be grounded where you are because it's how you remind yourself of why you start. But it is critical that you think afield and abroad, because if what you do is successful, more people benefit. And if more people benefit, then your mission is actually met.
Do you think it's too easy to be pulled afield too soon?
I think it depends on the person. I didn't leave it out on purpose because I don't want Sam to say I was being disingenuous. So right now I have a production company. So I because I've written so many books, I have now been turning those books into movies and television shows. I've done a documentary. And there are those who look at my portfolio and they say, I don't have a focus, that I'm doing too many things. But my mission statement remains the same. And so everything I do, I can trace it back to what my core beliefs are. Some of us are hedgehogs. We like one thing and this is the thing we do, and we concentrate there. My sister Leslie is a hedgehog. She's an attorney. That is what she is. It's what she wants to be. She's a federal judge now. Leslie has always been a hedgehog. You try to distract Leslie, she's eventually going to talk to you about the law, no matter what you say. And then the other idea is that they're foxes. Foxes like different ideas, and they wander through the ideas, collecting information from each of the things they try. I'm a fox. And the world needs both. You need foxes and hedgehogs, and you need hedgehogs that think they're foxes until they find the thing they want. And you have foxes who think they're hedgehogs until they realize there are multiple ways to live their lives. And so I do think the anchor point, though, is that you can't do everything all at once. And that's when people get pulled afield. It's when you think you can do all 5 things. You have to do things well. And so I think of it, do you know the game Jenga? So you stack all the blocks up. So it's like Jenga. So you stack everything up, but you have to be really careful which piece you pull out to work on. Because if you pull out the wrong piece, the weakest piece, the whole thing falls apart. That doesn't mean you don't try, but you just need to be prepared for failure, for the whole thing to collapse. But you also have to build it sturdy enough. And so for each thing that you're interested in, for each thing that might be a call on your time and attention, be very careful to build the infrastructure and the foundation so that it's strong enough for you to try the next thing.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I think it's what, the sort of the point is like, sort of your personal mission, right? And you look at the sort of the world of, not one does, as like, right, a portfolio of impact. And as long as it sort of fits within your personal mission and that portfolio, right, it actually can be really self-reinforcing and magnifying. No, I love that. So shifting gears a little bit, because we have a handful of people here who are, I think myself included, of like early in my career. One of the things that you said, and I absolutely love this, and I apologize if I misquote you.
Please.
But it was during your commencement speech at Spelman, and Spelman is your alma mater, right? And you basically said, I didn't want to run for governor because of the title. Like, I wanted to run for governor to do the work. And when you lost the race, it meant you didn't have the title, but you still had the work to do.
Right.
And I love that, I mean, you said it so eloquently, and also it just resonated with me so much, especially as people are growing in their career. Maybe you don't get that promotion, maybe you don't get that job you want, but you're still going for the work. How do you sort of share some of your thoughts with these young mid-career professionals who sort of have aspirations for big titles and big work and keep motivated in that way?
So in 2018, I was the most Googled politician in the world, and I lost. So everybody saw it. My niece, who at the time was 5, I have several nieces and nephews, but the 5-year-old said, "Aunt Stacey, are you a loser?"
Oh, no.
No. And I said, yes. And a few years later, I said, I'm the best loser ever. Because part of, and this goes to the underlying philosophy for me. You cannot make progress if you don't try. And if you try, you might be successful, you might not. But the only way to guarantee you don't fail is to never try. But what you're trying matters. And so for me, there is the work, which is I believe poverty is immoral, and I am trying multiple ways to tackle it. Through the nonprofit sector, the for-profit sector, through the civic sector. But I also know that there are certain titles that give you access to more resources, more power, more platform. And so often we become distracted by the title that we forget that the reason we want the title is to do the work. I have multiple titles. My business partner, we've been business partners for almost 20 years. In every company we've started, she is the CEO. I am the COO. Now, for people who know us both, they look at me and they said, why aren't you the CEO? I don't need that title because she's the forward-facing person. She's going to go out and find the business because I'm doing these other things. And my responsibility was to acknowledge that the title of CEO gave her access, and that's the title she needed. My title is COO. I do operations. And in our business model, that worked. And people who tried to cause tension between us, because she is a white woman and I'm a black woman, and we have very different politics, and they would try to make us dislike each other. We would push back together. The title matters, but the title is not the end goal. The title is about what does it give you access to, what resources are available, what platform can you have. But the work says that even if I don't have the title, I can figure out a way to find the resources. I can figure out a way to find the access. I can figure out a way to find entry. And so I didn't get to be governor, and so I created Fair Fight. I didn't get to become governor the second time, and I am now running another entity. And for me, being a good loser, being the best loser, is that I'm never defined by what I don't get. I'm defined by what I try. And it's hard because we are trained to only respect success. I respect progress. If I am the same as I was the day before, I have not done my job. If I am better, if I've learned something, even if it didn't come to fruition, if I have more knowledge, more comprehension, then I've made progress. And progress, when it's stacked up, progress sometimes exceeds title. Because I may not be the governor of Georgia twice, but in response, I've had these multiple opportunities that I never could have imagined. But the work matters. And as long as you know you're doing the work, the title is a nice to have. It is sometimes great to have. It would be great to be governor because I could do at scale many of the things I think about. But if I can't do it at scale with those resources, my responsibility is to figure out which piece can I do without that title until I figure out another way to get there.
Well, Inkomoko, we are a values-driven organization, and one. Are you a vegetarian?
No.
Okay.
I said I'm from the South. I've eaten the goat, so just so we're clear. I just had nowhere to keep it.
Our very first value was, and you'll see it. You can see it on the wall of the kitchen. Is we eat goat.
I eat goat too.
And we talk about, we've had Sam, going back to her, she has been one of our goats. That is the award we give for our greatest performers by quarter, by team, et cetera. And what we eat goat means here is that we celebrate success and we hold each other up in hard times. And so for you, we would have goats for you and your entire journey. So just know the proverbial goat.
Thank you.
And I can work with Paulina to where to send the actual goat
Again?
now.
In Wiggins, Mississippi.
Okay, that's okay. So I actually have two questions. Do you ever Google yourself?
No.
Okay, because that would be silly.
No, because not everyone likes me.
Oh, no.
I haven't been on Facebook since 2008.
Well, that's probably good.
Well, but I learned not to. I was there, so probably the best way to say it. Someone wanted to do a documentary about me, and I said no. And she was very upset. And she's like, "Well, you could record." I'm like, "I was there. I don't need to see it." And anyone who's telling me about what I did, they're either getting it terribly right or terribly wrong. And if it's terribly wrong, I don't need to know. If it's terribly right, good. They were validating what I think. So no, but not to say you shouldn't Google yourselves, but there are lots of not so nice things that people say about me, and you can't really sift through that. Google does not have that function yet.
You can't do filter nice.
No.
Yeah, right. Okay. Not yet. So one of the very first things that I ever heard about you, and I hope this is not terribly wrong.
Please. I'll correct it.
Please do, was from someone in Silicon Valley. And I don't think it was our friend Stacey. I think it was someone else who had met you maybe like 15 years ago before or something. And I was like, oh, I just met this woman, Stacey Abrams. She is so strategic and data-driven. She has a plan to turn Georgia blue, and like has a methodical implementation plan and has the strategy to back it up. She is one of the most impressive people that I have seen come through this office. I mean, I thought that was an incredible compliment and like pulled me to want to know more about you. But is that how you sort of approach with your COO mind? Like data-driven, you just make a plan and work a plan?
Well, so ambition without a plan is just a dream. We all have things we love to do, but until there's a plan, there's no way to prove it, there's no way to access it, there's no way to correct for it. So when I was 18, I was at Spelman College, and a boy named Chad broke my heart. He said that I was...
So all of this already, she like needed a minute. Like, I was like, sorry to interrupt, but that was a whoo.
Well, he broke my heart, and he said that I was doing a lot of different things, and he said I didn't have enough time for him, and that I was going to die alone and not without even a plant, because I wasn't nice enough. I would just be surrounded by books and numbers. And so I was very heartbroken, and I got really mad. And I went to the computer lab. Now, mind you, this is back in 1992. So I go to the computer lab at Spelman, and I pull up something called Lotus 123, which none of you are old enough to understand. It was the precursor to Excel. And I did a spreadsheet, and I laid out all the ways I was going to be amazing, and he would regret it. It started out that way, but then I started out thinking about here are all the ways I was going to rub his face in my success one day, because I was very bitter because it was a really bad breakup. But then I started thinking, okay, what are these things that I want? So I had a column of here are the things I want to achieve, and then here are the things I need to do to get there, and here are the resources I need to find along the way. Now this is at 18. I still have that spreadsheet.
And pre-internet 18.
Yes, this was pre-internet. This was basically when this is when hamsters were still running the machines. This is 1992. But I say that to say, even then, I was always very intentional. When we were kids, when we did our Christmas lists, there's, again, something you guys, there were catalogs called Sears Wish Book. And when we did our Christmas list, we would do our list, and I would do what I wanted, the page it was on, and how much it cost in case Santa needed to know. So I've always been very methodical. In our family of 6, my older sister I'm number 2. My older sister is the captain. I am finance and logistics. My sister Leslie is the cruise director, meaning she plans all the fun stuff, and then the younger 3 just do what we tell them. But because of that, what I learned is, and what has made, I think, most of my ambitions realizable in some way, is that I start with the wildest idea. So in Georgia, where Republicans controlled everything, I became the minority leader. I got my job after we lost every single statewide election. We had the fewest number of people in Georgia history in my party in power. And I said, I want to be in charge. And then I put together it was basically a 20-page PowerPoint presentation where I laid out, it would take us 10 years and we would lose this many elections, but we had to try, so to win 4 seats, we had to try for 12 to win, and that of those 12 seats we were going to try for, I thought we could win 4, we would come close in 3, we would be completely shellacked, but we would make them spend money. And then every year after that, I plotted out where I thought we would make progress. But the other part was I told the people, so I paid for my own plane ticket, and I went to a bunch of rich people across America, and I showed them this plan, and they laughed at me because Georgia is a very conservative state. They did not believe it was possible, and that especially if it was possible, I wouldn't be the person who would make it so. But what I did was then the following year, I came back and I showed them my plan. I showed them how we updated it, and every year thereafter. And each time I would come back, the funders who believed in me, I would come back and be like, yes, we lost terribly. This was a complete and utter disaster, but here's what we learned. And because I was data-driven, they knew it wasn't just my hope and ambition. It was, I could prove what I was thinking. I could learn from what I was doing, and they could then see it. And what what is often surprising, and you all have probably seen it too, you have people who want to do what you do, and they tell you, I want to be successful, I want this job, I want this business. But when you ask them how they're going to get there, it sounds like gibberish, or it sounds like they watched a really good episode of Shark Tank, and that's it. But they don't know how to do this. They can't tell you how they're going to take the steps. What I have found is that by writing it down, by concretizing it, not only can I show others what I'm doing, I can remind myself of what I intended. Because when you get caught up, when the plan doesn't work, when you run for governor as you thought you would, but you do not become governor, what were the backup plans? Because not only do I plan what I want, I also plan for what happens if I don't get it. And too often in business in particular, we only plan for success. And if we do plan for, if there's a contingency plan, the contingency plan does not assume disaster, it just assumes slightly less. I assume disaster. I assume if everything goes horribly wrong, this is what I do next.
I had a pleasure, because I live in South Carolina, so I saw your first campaign, your first 2017. You wear so many hats, but many entrepreneurs we work with, we support, usually it's a lonely journey, and it's a very, very much a lonely journey. And then hearing what you do, what is the advice for someone who's visionary? How do you build a team? Because behind you, I know there are maybe hundreds and hundreds of people. And if anyone follow the American politics, if you run a campaign, it's a costly experience. It's a lot of people behind. Can you maybe shed light for entrepreneurs that it's a lonely journey, but you need to trust the process, that you need to have people to build the dream with you?
You do. So I always have a partner, whether it's my campaign manager, my business partner. And when I say partner, it doesn't mean we have the same jobs. It just means there's someone else in it with me. And that's important, because even if I am the figure, even if I'm what people know, you want someone who's holding you accountable. But you also want someone who thinks differently than you do, because they challenge you to think better. They sharpen your ideas. They come up with ideas you didn't come up with. And one of the dangers of entrepreneurship is that we think we have to be the architect of every original idea. We have to be the brilliant visionary. We alone, and if we didn't come up with it, maybe they think we shouldn't have the job. Mm-hmm. That's not the case. So I have business partners in all things, whether it's the civic sector, the nonprofit sector, the business sector, because I want someone else to be accountable with me. So that's my first person. But I will tell you, my circle of people is a dot. I don't have a whole coterie of people I tell everything to, because people have their own ambitions. People have human frailty. And often what you want to accomplish, you feel better telling people about it, but that doesn't actually expand your capacity for getting it done. And so you want to start with your partner. You want to then have a small group of people you trust as your advisors. And those advisors can be people who work for you. One of my key advisors when I became leader was I'd worked on I'd run a campaign right before I became minority leader, and it was a mayoral race. And one of the youngest people on my staff was a young woman named Ashley. She was 2 years out of college. Ashley was 23. She became my chief of staff, in part because I was becoming the leader of a party at a time when we were losing everything, but we were also in a demographic inflection. Georgia, much like the South, much like America, and the world is getting younger and younger and more diverse. I was older, and I needed someone who had a different perspective. And so in that case, my partner was 20 years younger than I was, but her perspective was so important. And because I trusted her perspective, I could also get her to think about things in ways I never could, because her experiences were different. She remains one of the people in my dot. Then you want that larger, so you start with your partner, then you want your dot, and that's like 3 or 4 people that you really trust. And they know that you'll kill them if they ever not kill them, but they know that they will be in deep trouble. Them. There will be deep disapproval if they betray your trust. And then around them you want a ring. And that ring is really your support system. Those are people who share your vision. They understand your values. They don't have the same skin in the game, but they have the same instinct for success. And those are the folks that you always want to be the most careful of, because your partner will forgive you, your dot will support you, but that circle is the weakest part and therefore needs the most attention. And often in entrepreneurship, we are so focused on either the person funding us or the person that we're competing against, we forget the people we need to lift us up. And that is the place where I think the most work has to go into. So when I was running in 18, I had this amazing network of people, many of whom I didn't know personally, but I was very intentional about finding out who they were, reaching out to them, letting them know, and giving them the resources they needed to help me, because ultimately they're trying to help me, so help them help you. And then from that, you create these multiple rings. So then eventually you're the planet of Saturn, and you've got all these rings surrounding you. But each of those rings, you're intentional about designing it so that every ring is supporting the next one. And so that even if it's far from you, the ethos of who you are, the ethic of what you're doing ripples all the way out, and no one ever doubts the core mission. And sometimes that's language that you use. Sometimes it is, it's the goat. It's something that connects everyone so that even if they're far from you, they still feel connected to you. But it is lonely because ultimately you alone you may not have the only vision, but you are the core vision. And so yes, it is. And when your name is on the ballot, no matter who was your campaign manager, who else ran with you, they only remember that you lost. If your business failed, they only remember whose name was at the CEO. And so there is a loneliness that's embedded in being the one. And so your goal is to make certain that when you fall, there are enough people near you that if they don't catch you, they at least prop you up and will give you time to recover for the next challenge. Absolutely.
Other questions? Yeah, Bright, please.
I have a question.
Yes.
It's such an honor to meet you. I have a friend who went to Morehouse College, and I can't wait to brag to him that I met you.
As you should.
His name is not Chad, though. No.
It's okay.
I have a question. So I think having worked in politics and policy making and then being an entrepreneur yourself, I would like to hear your thoughts about why young entrepreneurs who often, I think, feel the disconnect between their own experience as entrepreneurs and the policy makers or politicians who oftentimes don't get it. How would they navigate that? Like, it's going through a lot, trying to employ people, trying to create a product, but the people who really are supposed to create the environment for them to flourish sometimes don't get it. So
Yes.
What has been your experience, and what would you say?
Wrote a whole book about it called Level Up. So I mean, but that's absolutely true. We like to think of ourselves as a world. Okay, capitalism presumes that everyone has the same intention and the same desire for outcome. It is not true. It's like everyone speaks the same language, but we don't use the words the same way. And policymaking is the most perfect example, that while they speak the language of business, that doesn't mean they understand it at all. For many who claim to understand business, they have inherited wealth or they have forgotten how they got there. And their policymaking is not designed to bolster those who are trying to get there. It's designed to protect those who are already there. And that's why it's hard when you're starting out to get what you need, because they're not focused on you. They're focused on those who have what they have and want to keep it. And so that's one of the reasons I always tie together civic participation with everything else that I do. So whether I'm talking to young people, I did a program when I was in the legislature. Twice a year I met with elementary school kids and with high school kids, and I would walk them through how the political system works, because it's not designed for them. It's designed for their grandparents. So in the United States, almost everything is designed for the elderly because they have been voting for a long time and they are the most powerful constituent group. Young people are the least powerful because most young people don't know what they don't know, and they think they've been successfully convinced that it doesn't matter what politicians do. Politicians rely on that. They rely on communities that need help, not knowing they have the right to help. And so to your point, most of the politicians and the civic or the civil society leaders they don't know what they don't know. They know what they're told. And what they are told is that by the billionaire or the millionaire or the established business that's competing with David, they know what he's telling. They know that story. And so one of the responsibilities and opportunities is pulling together entrepreneurs, because you have to amplify your voice. They're going to listen to the people who know to come and ask. Those who are being left out and left behind, they individually complain, but they never complain together. Or if they complain together, they complain to each other. If you could fix it, you would have. You've got to complain to the people who can change it. And I'll tell you this about politicians. I said this earlier today, and it is one of the things I want people to understand about politicians. Politicians are the most afraid of someone who can find them. Mm-hmm. If you can find me, that means you know my job, you know my name, and you can cost me my job. Make them afraid of you. Make them absolutely concerned that when Bright calls, that when you show up, you're going to have 50 people with you. And that not only do you have 50 people with you, but because you built a network, you've got 25 people in every single state who can also call. They respond to, this is a terrible way to say it. Politicians respond to money, attention, and power. You guys don't have any power. And you probably don't have any money, but you have attention. And especially younger people, you all understand how to build attention in ways that no generation has ever understood. You have both the technological capacity, but also a cultural understanding that transcends every generation. You don't want to threaten politicians to start. It's with anything you want. You start by cajoling. You start by trying to get them on your side. You only emphasize their failure after you've given them a chance to be successful. But so often what we find, especially with younger people, is they go immediately to anger and to castigation. They are accusatory, and it's not wrong, but think about how you react. When someone wants something from you, are you more likely to give it to them when they ask and are complimentary, or when they're yelling at you and telling you how terrible you are? Who are you going to listen to first? So out loud, this is complimentary. You're going to listen to the person, and you're going to listen to the person who keeps showing up. If I know you're going to come one time, I can tell you, oh yes, I'll get to it, and you're going to leave, and I won't see you again. I never have to do what you want. But if I know you're going to be back every other Thursday, I'm going to dread that Thursday. I'm like, oh God, let me give them something so they'll stop coming, hopefully, or at least they won't stay as long. That's how you build political power, because politicians are not there for you. They are there for everyone, and they give primacy to the ones who demand their attention. And then you can eventually run for office and fix it yourself.
So I think time is not on our side, as always, but maybe we have time for two quick questions?
And I'll give much shorter answers.
Yes, Olive,
Okay.
please.
Yeah, and so going back to, as an organization, we're at a point where we are adding more and more service because it makes sense for us to do advocacy, to do market linkages. And in your journey, you've had to venture into different things.
Oh, yes.
Was there a time when you were like, okay, this is not what we are good at? Or like you ran for 2 campaigns and you started 2 businesses, and you rightly said you had a backup plan. But was there a point where you're like, okay, in as much as I think we want to do this because it ends poverty and poverty is immoral, but we are not the right people to do it.
Always. So when I created an organization, so let's use the 4 corners organization. So for democracy, I believe in democracy, not because it's this interesting construct, but because in current civil society, it's how you get stuff. If you want things, democracy is how you get it. Unless you live in an authoritarian regime, in which case if you live in a place that does not respect democracy, then you have to find other ways. But democracy, by and large, is the most effective means of accessing the services you need. And so my construct was, what do I need to do in this sector to achieve democracy? So New Georgia Project, registered voters. That's the beginning. But then I needed the systems that they were voting in to be fair. So I created Fair Fight. But then the systems were designed, who you got to vote for was based on the census. If they didn't count you when they drew the political lines, they could literally ignore your community and you would never have a chance to elect anyone who shared your values. So I created Fair Count. And then once you were voting, the question is what policies are being implemented. So I created SEAP, the Southern Economic Advancement Project. It's a policy organization. So those are the 4 things. I've been asked to also create a political campaign school. No, I started a project called the Blue Institute, and then I gave it to someone else to run because it was, while incredibly important, it was not the most, it wasn't the highest and best use of my time, and someone else could do it better. And so part of what I try to do is once I know the things I need to do, I think about what's missing, and then I go and find someone who's already doing it, and I try to offer them my help or encouragement. And if no one's doing it, I find somebody and say, you should probably go do this and let me tell you who can help you get it done. But you should never be afraid to say, that's not my lane. Even if you are a 4-lane highway, the 5th lane may be the one that gets you into the accident. So it's okay not to. And it's okay to be in that lane and realize that's not the thing for me and to come back.
I mean, all of it seems like it's like product, process, people, policy.
Yep.
I had a comment. Thank
Yes.
you so much for sharing the journey with us. It's really inspiring. I feel like you should actually be speaking to all the secondary school, elementary school, universities, especially wannabe entrepreneurs, because I feel like you've really tried so many things. You know, the fact that you wrote books, that you did production, that you did movies. I feel like you've done it all, you know, and the political bit of it. And what I think I learned from you, and I feel I really want to take back, is the fact that you never stop. You never stop. And you really learned from your failures as well, and you became like the best user. And I think for me, and for basically even the people that are employed today, it's that. It's like you can fail and really, you know, grow stronger, you really know your weaknesses, iterate your plan, just make sure that you're actually still going, you know,
Exactly.
going. And I think for the entrepreneurs today, it's actually also like a huge lesson. But really, doing public lectures for other people, for young people, not only in the political bits, but also in the entrepreneurship space, would be amazing.
Yes, ma'am.
I think you have a lot to give. There's so much strength and courage and determination that you can inspire. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I will close by saying this. So that, first of all, that's very kind. And thank you all for having me. I got asked once, am I optimistic or pessimistic about the world? I'm neither. I am determined. Optimism means you're buoyed by success, but it also tends to mean that you're deflated when things go wrong. Pessimism means you don't think anything's going to go right anyway, so why bother trying? I focus on being determined. When you're determined, the only thing you can do is keep working. My much more crass way of putting it, you've heard the phrase, is the glass half full or half empty? Okay. I think it's half full. I just think it's probably poisoned. And my job is to find the antidote. And so the urgency of that means I've got to keep working.
Manuel, you have a quick one? Yeah?
Thank you very much for giving us this time, because for me, I'm really inspired. As someone who is in the business and I work with the private sector, so I have a team that we normally get time to share with. But I've learned something from you, and I think my first takeaway is that I have to set a goal, but if I don't get that goal, I have to have a backup. That's how we differently do. The other thing is that we have to come together as young people, having one voice, and then try to influence the policymakers. But I want to ask you one question, because for me, I'm that kind of person who focuses only on one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But within the young entrepreneur in Rwanda, there are some people who like you. They can do several things. But sometimes you discourage them. You say, you have to be passionate about one thing. Do you have any book, any podcast where you can just read and say, you have someone who did
Yes.
so many things?
And so, Julian, so it's called Lead from the Outside. Mm-hmm. And I have a whole chapter on the fact that you don't just pick one thing, that you don't have to, but that you have to know why you're doing the things you're doing. But yes, so it's called Lead from the Outside. So the 2 business books, one's Lead from the Outside and the other is Level Up. So Level Up is about entrepreneurship. And then Lead from the Outside is just about, the first chapter is actually called Fear. Mm-hmm. So it's about how do you deal with things you're afraid of. And then there's a chapter on power, because so often we don't think we have the right to power. There's one on money, especially when you don't have any of it and you're trying to find it. And there's a chapter on building mentorship, building networks, and one on how to build political power. So that's my attempt to try to answer this. But yeah, and one thing is, one of the critiques of me in my campaign is that I do too many things. So how can I do any one thing well? And the instinct is always going to be to keep people want you to be something they understand. And there's a lot of pressure to want to be that. And I think, Sam, I keep using you as an example, part of what causes you to kind of limit what you say is that you don't want to scare people about who you are. Because our societies, especially African culture, whether it's African or African American, we are trained to sort of self-limit. And that's because for some, it's because they don't want us to be disappointed. They don't want us to fail. They don't want us to be upset. But what they see as a way to help shield us, it actually becomes a barrier to us. And so my encouragement is that even if you never ever say that, look, I do lots of different things. My sister Leslie does one thing. My older sister Andrea does one thing. My sister Janine does multiple things. So we're different. My brothers do. I have brothers too. I like them too. They do. I have a brother who was a social worker and now actually works for my production company and is amazing at it. The goal is not to figure out how many things you do. It's how well can you do the things you do. The people who do lots of things because they can't finish anything, that's different than doing multiple things because you're able to build them because they connect. Okay.
But before you go, if we can just share our appreciation and gratitude for you coming. Another value of Inkomoko is bravery. And the saying that we have here is, the brave rise together. And we are all, I know, a bit more brave today because of what you have done for this world. And thank you so
very
much.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.